Long down the right side, caught, touchdown, Washington State.
Booby, 61 3.
What a catch by Phillip Bobo.
The Palouse is gonna pop.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Field House Report. Today, we have a very special guest, first-team All-American and Cougar legend, Paul Sorensen. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, they throw that legend thing around pretty wildly. I don't know about that, but the All-American part's true and must have been a down year. But, it's Van McElroy, myself, a guy named Jim Bob Harris from Alabama, and Johnny Krim from Notre Dame. We were four white dudes back in the day, so that just tells you that the standards were much lower back then. But all four of us had an opportunity to go play in the National Football League. Some of them had better careers than others, and I was a short timer. But it opened some really cool doors for yours truly, especially on the broadcast side. And to be honest, being the old toad that I am now and seeing the beating that some of my teammates and guys that I've seen play, I'm kind of glad I only got 2 years in, honestly. And, the memory's still there. The rest of the body's falling apart, but at least the noodle between the ears is still kind of functioning. So that's cool.
That's the most important part. Okay, well, before we dive into it too much, I got a few housekeeping items to say here. One is if you like the content we're putting out, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to us to keep doing this thing. And I'd also like to give a shout out to CougFan.com, one of our sponsors. They are the Bible for WSU football and basketball, have been for 27 years. Get inside the huddle with CougFan.com. Okay, Paul. It's time. They've harvested the wheat on the Palouse. The nights are getting a little bit chillier. It's football season, finally. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I am. And by the way, I was the first in 98. Greg Witter reached out to me to become the first guest columnist at Cougar Fan. I could barely spell my name. So we've come a long way from back in the day and have great editors and Witter and Barry Bolton and Jamie and all of the folks, Steve Witter and Greg and all of the guys over the years have really been able to turn out great content. And you really get a good deep dive kind of behind the scenes into the know. So if you really want to know what's going on with Cougar football, basketball, all sports involving Washington State, you need to be involved with CougFan.com. That's my pitch. And I've been blessed to really have an opportunity to kind of meet some great coaches and players and hear some cool stories over the years and kind of pontificate on that. And that's been a blessing to be able to be tied in with that group for many, many years. And I'm surprised they still haven't fired my ass, but don't tell them because I'm sure they'll figure it out pretty soon. So anyway.
No, Greg Witter's awesome. I actually call him the Cougar Shakespeare is what I call him because the stuff he writes. I've always considered myself a halfway decent writer, but I've read his stuff and I'm like, yeah, we're not even on the same planet.
I call him the platinum professorial pile because he piles it higher and deeper and better than anybody I've ever met. And I'll give him, kind of my insight of my story, and then what he crafts comes out. It's like making bratwurst. You don't know what you don't want to know what goes into it. You just want to know what comes out at the end. But what he does is just incredible. And he is really gifted, on that front. And we've been very blessed over the years to have his tutelage and Barry Bolton, he's a knucklehead, but he does a great job too. And those are two really good guys that have done an outstanding job giving us some great insight over the years.
Okay, so we talked about it. Football season's coming. What's the best part of football season starting? I have to ask, is it the Old Crimson podcast? Did you miss Jim Moore?
Oh, hell no. Those guys are freaking idiots. I mean, we recorded our first one today and I made it 5 minutes into the thing and I was already yelling at them because they're such dumbasses. I mean, he doesn't change. We talk about the team. He doesn't know anything about it. He could barely find Pullman. I mean, I love him because he's so passionate about Washington State. He's the only volunteer guy I know that can get fired twice. He gets fired as a marshal at a golf course, and they tell him, look, we don't want you to bring exposure to the golf course about this thing. So he writes about it. So they bring him in and say, hey, Jim, don't write about this thing or we're going to have to fire you. So then he goes out and he writes about the experience of him nearly getting fired, and he gets fired. So you just got to love him because he hasn't changed. And we were in full throttle 5 minutes into the deal, and that'll come out, and you'll be able to hear the stuff. But it's interesting because Puckett, he has to balance the two boneheads on either side of the rail, and we're going there, and we appreciate that. That's sponsored, sorry, by Flat Stick Pub. Got to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Another great Cougar group. They do an outstanding job. Andy and and Dan and company, the Largents, they're fantastic people, great Cougs, and they've got locations all over the state of Washington. We appreciate what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually planning on having Andy on
Oh,
coming
he's
up early
awesome.
next week. Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
saw him at Marcus Trufant's golf event over at Newcastle last week, and he's a pretty good stick. I was impressed, and
Nice.
those guys, they always figure out a way to get out of the golf course, which is pretty cool. So upper management, the poor guys that are in there slinging the beer and the food, and yet management's out there slapping the golf ball around the course. That's pretty cool.
Well, everybody that hasn't take a minute this football season each week to listen to the Old Crimson podcast on Jason Puckett's show. It's really great. There's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes it's should be probably called the Screw You podcast or whatever because
Yeah,
because
we get a little salty. Yeah, we do.
Jim likes to play devil's advocate, and it's great. There's a lot of just Cougar knowledge in that podcast that not everybody else has, so it's worth a listen for sure. Okay, so we're gonna jump into a few different topics with you today. We're gonna start with your playing days, talk a little bit about what you did after you played, and then of course talk about this upcoming WSU football season. So starting out, after 2 years at Diablo Valley College, you wind up in Pullman. How in the heck did you end up at Wazoo? What was that recruiting process like?
Well,
did you know anything about WSU?
uh, I knew about the throwing Samoan, and I knew about Dwayne Brailsford doing a backflip off the Beta House, landing in a snowbank, and some guy blowing himself up he made a bomb and blew himself out of one of the dorms. I thought that was pretty cool, and I thought, wow, this is a happening school. It was interesting. I played, Mark Pleiss and I were kind of a bundled package. We both got recruited together. I was fortunate enough, I played both ways. I was a running back and a corner. And Mark he was also a decathlete. We ran track together. So we did two sports. We did track and field and football. And then I never came off the field. And that was the reason I got recruited. I had 20 offers. And here's the funny part. This is the recruiting pitch. I had two partials out of high school, played in a bad high school team, brand new school, had a winning season my freshman year in high school, and nothing in between. We were terrible. We got crushed. Junior college, 2-9 and 2-9. We got crushed. Then we rolled into it. Well, anyway, make a long story short. So the guy that lives across the street, Jim Swan, was the offensive coordinator at Diablo Valley College, the JC and in the area in the Golden Gate Conference. So he walks across the street, and here's his recruiting pitch. Hey, Sorensen, you got a couple of partials. Why don't you come over and play a couple, year or two at JC, and we'll see if we can get you maybe, a scholarship or something. Maybe, you might be worth a salt, and somebody will want to have you on the team. It's like, wow. That was riveting. That sure fired me up. Thanks, coach. Okay. What's a scholarship worth? He goes, $250 a semester. Wow. That's how much tuition was in the day. I got a riveting $250 scholarship, and that covered our books and tuition and all the fun stuff back in the day. And then so we played, and I played corner, returned punts and kickoffs. No big deal. Got second team all league. It was kind of fun. We finished 2-9. So no big deal, no letters, nothing. I figure, well, I'm just going to go play one more season as a sophomore. And then, all of a sudden he walks across the street. He's got a box. He knocks on the door, and now he's the head coach because the head coach quits because he went 2-9. He's now the head coach at Diablo Valley College, my next door neighbor. He hands me a box. There's 150 letters in it from people. I had no clue that I was getting recruited. I had no idea that anybody wanted, Paul Sorensen to come. And so I've got all these letters now in the summer. I'm going, oh, wow. Well, maybe somebody wants me to come play for him. This is great. So then I started filling all this stuff out, and it was just crazy. I was going to Stanford along with Pleiss. His brother had just finished graduating, playing there. Bill Walsh and George Seifert were the head coaches there. Well, guess what? They ended up getting the 49er job. So we went through the process. I took my trips. I went to Oregon State. I went to Washington State. I went to Stanford. I went to Pacific. because I had some friends there and I just wanted to go hang out, and I went to Arizona. Those were the trips. I actually also went to Hawaii, but that was because we were on vacation and the Hawaii coaches found me. I don't know how the hell they did. They found me on the beach and they just took my brother and I, we went out and had lunch. My
Nice.
parents would go, where the hell did you go? And I said, well, the Hawaii guys found me and they took us to lunch and showed us around the campus. I'm going, okay. So I thought this was cool. They were actually talking to him. They thought he was a player. They didn't even know who I was. I mean, so I'm kidding. Anyway, it was we had a great time. So then the Niner job kind of kicked that out, and then Paul Wiggins came in, and they saw two junior college guys. They don't recruit junior college guys, and
Right.
so they blew us off. So we had a great time at WSU, and I just liked Walden, and I liked he was just this. He could be a Southern guy from Mississippi, or a guy from Wyoming, or he could have an accent from California. And he just came in and he just says, look, we're not going to promise you anything. We're going to give you a chance. You got 2 years to come in and compete. He brought 13 JC guys in and he goes, we're close. We think we can get over the top here, but we need some experience. And we had played, 22 games. I mean, I had more experience than anybody in the secondary, and I was a corner. I wanted to be a white corner in the Pac-10 and show that I could play that position. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And so I was starting at corner along with Jeff Files and Nate Bradley. So we were battling, to be there. And then they moved me to safety and I was pissed. So, so Walden, he calls me up and then, of course, this is before I started drilling everybody and I got in trouble. So Jim brings me into the office, and anytime you get called into Jim Walden's office, it's probably not a good thing. And I was really trying to make the team because you don't know where you stand when you're a transfer. You don't know anybody on the team. It was just Pleiss and I and 13 other guys. Of the 13 JC guys, 7 started, 6 quit. It was all or nothing. You either made the team and started or you were gone. And that's just kind of how we rolled. So Walden brings me in the office. He sits me down. And he goes, okay, Sorensen, here's the deal. He goes, do you want to play a third of the field as a corner, or would you like to play the whole field as a safety? Because we need a free safety that can cover and it has range, and you can cover and you have range. And I'm going, well, I really want to play corner. He goes, third of the field, the whole field. Third of the field or the whole field. I go, okay, I get it, coach. And he goes, and another thing, would you quit lighting up the wide receivers? I said, well, isn't that the job of the guys? He goes, not when the ball's 15 feet over his head. I go, well, they're kind of soft, coach. And I want to toughen them up. And he goes, they're your teammates. I go, I'm trying to make the team. He goes, trust me, you're going to make the team. But if you blow one more guy up with a ball over the dude's head or 15 feet out of bounds, I'm jerking your scholarship. And I went, got it. So that was my Jim Walden story there. He was fair, but he also made a point that, I kind of had to pull it back a little bit because I was a little over the top. And that's how I played. I played, to balls to the wall, man. It was all or nothing kind of thing. And that's the only way I knew how to do it. And it was fun. And that's kind of how we were right there our junior year. We went 4-7, but of those 7 losses, if we would have had a stop at the end of the game, or our offense would have maybe been able to score, we'd have been able to pull out about 5 or 6 of those wins. So we knew we were pretty darn close to being pretty good. And so that rolled into the senior year. And then the senior year is where we had the big year. And that was, other than losing that dang Apple Cup when we lost, Clete Casper, he went down. And the one thing I will say about the Huskies is they had won the Pac-12 the year before. We were up 14-0 in Spokane. We were kicking their butt, and then we lost our corner. He blew his knee and then brought another kid in, and they picked on him pretty good, threw a couple of touchdowns late, and they ended up pulling away late and went down and smoked Iowa pretty good in the Rose Bowl. That was a good Husky team, but we should have beat them in Spokane. So we knew we were right there. And so we took it up another notch, in the off season going into our senior year. And that really kind of set the stage.
Yeah. People don't talk enough, in my opinion, when you look at Cougar history, about the importance of that 1981 team. That was the first bowl game in 50 years. You're talking about 1 win away from being in the frickin' Rose Bowl. You lose a tight Holiday Bowl game to a good BYU team. That was a fantastic team, and it really changed the outlook for WSU football and set the stage for what we saw in the 90s and early 2000s with Mike Price.
Well, think about how many teams. You've had 2 Pac-10 championships, 2 Rose Bowl teams. You've had multiple Holiday Bowl teams, Sun Bowl teams, Aloha Bowl teams. There's been, I think, 15 or 16 bowl teams about every 3 or 4 years now. Now I've gone, 7 out of the last 8? I mean, it's been really impressive.
Yeah.
So what happened is we had to kind of break through. I have to remember back in the early 80s, there was only 11 or 12 bowl games. Now there's 52, I think, or some ridiculous number. I
Yeah.
think if you show up, if you have, you win 2 games, you get to go to a bowl game, but that's not true. You gotta have, you kind of have a, there's a balance in there. But it was, there were teams. I mean, the 1983 WSU team was a great football team. They
Yep.
crushed UW, and they
Yep.
didn't get in, and
Right.
they should have gone. And so
Right.
there were teams that were deserving that didn't make it. But we were picked dead last in 1981. They picked us last,
Yeah.
and we were leading the Pac-10. All we had to do was win or tie over the Huskies. Then we go. And that UCLA game basically cost us the Rose Bowl. Norm Johnson kicked, I think, a 54, 56-yard field goal against us to tie it at 17-all. We dominated them. I mean, we kicked their ass.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had 5 turnovers because old Timmy Harris couldn't hang on to the ball, but he rushed for over 200 yards. But he fumbled like 3 times, and we had 5 turnovers. And we should have. They couldn't move the ball against us. We just smoked them, and they ended up tying us. And that tie, that half win, half loss, was the difference
Right.
in us. We could have still lost to Washington and would have been able to go to the Rose Bowl, and that
Right.
was a tough pill to swallow because
Yeah.
that's where we wanted to go. We
Right.
didn't. And the sad part of the whole thing is after that game, we're sitting in Husky Stadium and they're going dun 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 dun, dun. They're passing out the roses, and I got a broken nose. My nose is broken. Lee Blakeney's sitting next to me. He's got a broken forearm. He played the whole game with a broken arm. And we're sitting there, we're just crushed because everything we played with, everything we had, and we just couldn't get it done. And then the Holiday Bowl guy comes in his little red coat with his little Holiday Bowl logo, and he's all excited. He goes, "Hey, Cougs, you get to go to the Rose Bowl." And we just all went, just, no, this isn't the time, dude. You got to give
Right.
us some time, man. And
Right.
I get what he was doing. He was just doing his job, but it was such a bummer, and it was such a down thing for us because it was such an all or nothing thing for the Cougs. We wanted
Yeah.
to go to Pasadena, and we wanted to be Pac-10 champions,
Yeah.
and we didn't get it done. We let Cougar fans down, and to this day, I can still remember that game, how vivid that was, because we laid it on the line. We played with
Yeah.
everything we had. The best part is coming home afterwards. We had to fly back. Both Lee and I were Bay Area guys. He went to Ignatia Valley. I went to Northgate. They were rival schools. In fact, they broke the school in half, and that's what formed Northgate, my school. Because
Mhm.
I would have gone to Ignacio because it was 6,000 students. That just give you an idea. So we're sitting on the Alaska Airlines plane with like 8 people. So Lee and I are in the back of the plane, and the nice flight attendants came back and they gave us a 6-pack of beer and said, "Guys, you probably need to drink this." And they were
Yeah.
all Huskies. They were all Husky flight attendants. They
Yeah.
felt sorry for us, and they gave us free beer on the flight. So we had a
Yeah.
couple of beers and went home and soaked our wounds, and we're ready to go a week later. So there you go.
I do think that there's an element to being a Coug, and I got introduced to it really early on, of just being tough enough to deal with that heartbreak. I thought I was a Cougar fan when I was a little guy, and then the 2002 Apple Cup hit, and I don't know if you remember that one, but that was Jason
do.
Gesser. Yeah, number 3 in the country, he gets hurt, blah blah blah. That was, I just remember just the gut punch and just being so sad for weeks and weeks and weeks. But part of being a Coug is being able to take that
But
and
then
then
coming
just say,
back and beating UCLA and getting a
exactly.
chance to come back hurt on one leg, the Eric Coleman pick to seal it, and then going to the Rose Bowl. And I remember, doing a bunch of stuff for Fox Sports and being down there in Brentwood, and all the stuff going on. That was so, and then sitting in the stands with the Oklahoma fans. Good Lord, were those people obnoxious? But I mean, and then all the rumors about Price leaving and, and everything. But you're exactly right. The Coug fans are cut out of a different cloth. And that's the one thing for me that I saw that was, so the Stanford thing, there's a reason things happen, and that's what I tell people all the time. You just never know what direction you come to, as Yogi Berra says, you come to the fork in the road, you take it. So that fork for me was when Walsh and Seifert took the 49er job, and I ended up getting picked up off waivers by those guys, and I ended up spending a year with them. So it ended up working out. It just happened after college. So for me, being a Coug, being able to experience what Washington State is all about, being able to have the fan base, being able to play and then do something we haven't done in 50 years, but not getting over the top, I think that was kind of the epitome of the whole thing. But it set the stage for other teams to come in because we could prove, what, we're out here in the boonies, but we can still win. We can still put things together, and other teams are going to be able to come in and get it done. And they did. And that's the cool part. And that's where I feel that this 81 team needs to be in the WSU Hall of Fame, because they set the tempo. They were the
Yeah.
floor that got this thing going and really set the tempo for all the previous teams that have gone on and had the successes since then, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So we talked about you playing for Jim Walden. Obviously, he was quite the character himself. You also played with a lot of very talented teammates that had big personalities. Junior Tupelo, Rod Rutherford, Pat Beach. I mean, you could go on and on and on. Who is the biggest personality on that 81 team? And do you have a crazy story about them? I assume.
Oh, a lot of them. Beach, the first week I was there, took me to a gin and tonic party, and I still am throwing up from that one. Rod Rutherford breaks his nose in an alumni game that we played against Mike Price. We're idiots. We're out there working. I mean, we're in our 30s and we come back and play football. We got Kenny Green, Schwartz, Greger. We got 4 NFL guys. We're running bracket coverages. I blew up Philip Bobo and earholed him. He had no idea who I was until the next season when I'm interviewing him. And I think CJ Davis comes up and goes, "Hey, remember the guy that knocked you out in the alumni game?" He goes, "That's Sorensen." He goes, "That old guy?" I go, "Yeah, that was me, man.
That's awesome.
How you doing? Good to
That's
see
so
you." But
great.
Junior Tupolo, Junior was he's a minister, and
Yeah.
he was nuts. We used to have to watch him. Walden would assign you a weekend where, because if you didn't, he would get arrested. So we'd take him into the frat house. I was a Sigma Nu, and we'd take him downstairs, and we just buy him some pizza and beer. And we have some beers, and we'd keep him in the house.
Yeah.
And you'd usually end up with a couple of punches in the head and a knot in your forehead and a shiner. And then you take him back the next morning and get him
Yeah.
back. And you kind of had to babysit him. So
Right.
we had Kenny Collins, who could quote, any movie line ever invented in the history of mankind. I mean, we just had a bunch of crazy, goofy, Matt Elisora, he taught me the slap dance. I burned an eyebrow off, doing a couple of Samoan dances, and just it was such a cool, eclectic group. There was no
Yeah.
skin color, there was no race, creed, religion. We were all Cougs. We were all the
Yep.
same, and we all kind of came together and loved each other. And I think that's what made us special. I think that's what made us, and that's what really tied this 81 team together, was the closeness and the
Yeah.
tightness that we had, because we were so close that our junior year, where we came from all these different directions, and then we had that success, and then we had we were right there. Tons of Hall of Famers on that team, tons of NFL guys that got drafted, tons of all league, all American, a lot of great players
Yeah.
had came out in that 4 or 5 year. Mark Rippon, Super Bowl MVP. You had Eric Williams. You had Keith Millard. He'll punch you in the head for a pizza.
Yep.
He was NFL Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he had like 21 sacks one year. I mean, he was one of the greatest defensive linemen to come out of. I mean, just an animal. He was a tight end my junior year. He used to
Wow.
fight me every practice. And Beach would go beat him up. I go, "I'm running away from that guy. That guy scares me. He was nuts." So those were the kinds of guys that, they talk about practice being salty. Yeah, they were a little salty. So
Yeah.
it's changed. But I like it because Jimmy Rogers has kind of got that mindset back.
Yeah.
He's got these guys flying around, and they're talking smack, and they're throwing hands, and I'm excited to see what's going to come up here on Saturday against Idaho, because they're going to walk into a hornet's nest. This is a team that's rare to go, and I'm excited about the leadership that we're going to see.
Yeah, I've been thrilled to hear all the energy, and even when it's, guys butting heads and getting into tussles, that's a good thing. That means that practice is
That is a good
competitive.
thing.
That means
Yes.
that, yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear. Okay, so after your playing days, you got to have a job that would have in my dreams, and that's working with Bob Robertson. What was it like to be his color guy? How long did you do that for? I luckily some of those games are on YouTube. I don't know if you know this. You can actually find games broadcasted by Bob
I
Robertson.
thought they
and
would
Paul
burn
Sorensen.
those and make sure that nobody could ever hear those ever again, because your ears would bleed. Actually, I spent 14 years as Bob's sidekick. I had a whopping 1 years of experience after I was done, playing ball. I was down in the Bay Area selling glue. I worked for National Starch and Chemical. I glued my trunk shut because I had a pail that flopped over. So I couldn't open my trunk, and I had golf clubs and a tennis racket and a duffel bag in there. It was great. I sold a ton of the product because I couldn't open the trunk. Anyway, I got a call I got a call to come back to Spokane to be the Spokane Cougar Club director, just to work and do marketing promotion, sell, Cougar Club stuff and alumni, and, just be the guy in Spokane. We had 3 people. We had the Visitor and Convention Bureau, we had the Office of the President, and we had me. Now think of where WSU Spokane is and how big it's grown. We
Yeah.
started with 3. So
Wow.
I got hired by a guy by the name of Michael Campbell, who was doing the Rainier Bank Game of the Week. He had Sonny Six Killer and Bob Rondo on the west side doing stuff with Cairo, doing TV. They do the Thursday night Game of the Week in Seattle. Well, they wanted to do the same thing over here. So Bob Hammaker had KYU TV, and it was an independent TV station. They did the Thursday night Game of the Week. So
Right.
I was in selling Hammaker something, and he bought it, and it pissed him off because I sold him something, because he doesn't like to buy anything from anybody. And he goes, "Hey, why don't you hire that Sorensen guy? Because he seems to be a pretty good salesman, and he likes to talk. I don't have any, experience other than they stick a mic in my pie hole and I give quotes." So he calls me in and he goes, "Hey, do you want to do some television?" I go, "Well, I've never done any TV." He goes, "Well, it's not that hard. They stick a mic in your face and you talk about the game." I go, "Okay." So it was me and Bill Stanley, who was the KSPS Channel 7, guy. And so we're up there doing a game at Albee. And I remember the first time the TV thing, kicks in and we have to do an opening set, Bill turns to me and he said something. I have no idea what he asked me. I'm just standing there going, and the guy's going, "Say
You're
something."
on.
I go, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, okay. We're talking about Gonzaga Prep and Ferris." "Great. This is great. This is great to be out at Albee. What are we talking about, Bill?" And he goes, "How about Gonzaga Prep's defense?" "Okay." Then we just rolled in. And from that point on, I had 1 whole year experience as a TV slap doing the Greater Spokane League, Rainier Bank Game of the Week. Michael Campbell owned the WSU rights. Well, the color guy, I think it was Todd Pickett, ended up getting the Creme TV job, so he couldn't do the TV thing because it was a competing station and they didn't want to have him on, and they wouldn't let him
Right.
out of his contract. So they had an opening for a color guy. So a 25-year-old snot-nosed Paul Sorensen ends up getting hired doing working alongside Bob Robertson. So here's Bob Robertson's advice to me. I said, "Bob, how do you want me to work with you? Because I don't know what I'm doing. So how do you want me to do this?" He goes, "Really simple, Paul." He goes, "I'm going to set the stage. So, when I'm talking, everything is cool. And then when I stop, basically you can come in and say what you want. But as soon as they break the huddle, shut the F up." That's exactly what he said. Well, there
Yeah.
was other words in there beside the F part, and I just went, "Good, I'm done. That's cool." And then I had to stick out my arm when I wanted to say something. And that's how we worked together for 14 years. And he was one of the greatest. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, and we should have a freaking statue out in front of Martin Stadium. I don't know
Amen.
why, but he's
Right.
iconic in terms of what he was able to do. One of the last guys to ever recreate baseball. What he did for Washington State football and basketball and baseball over the years is unbelievable, and we'll never have another Bob Robertson ever again. So I
No,
was
we will
blessed
not.
blessed to have that experience, and that's
Yeah.
how I got in. That's how I got in. I've been doing Eastern Washington, ever since. I've done a bunch of TV. I did 5-6 years. I did College Football Saturday out of Las Vegas. It was a smaller market, national game of the week kind of thing, and then the
Yeah.
guy stopped paying the bills, and so we stopped doing that. But it's in fact, I'm headed to San Antonio to do Eastern Washington in a
All
card
right.
where the heat index is 115 in San Antonio on
Holy
Saturday,
smokes.
with 85% chance for thunderstorm Saturday night. You think we're going to get that game in? Yeah, good luck with that one. But that's the nature of the beast. And so coming up on your 33, I think now,
Wow.
it's so it's just crazy. You just never know. So
Yeah.
you never know where that opportunity and that window is going to be, and I just did it kind of out
Sure.
of a whim, and we
Yeah.
just happened to be in the right place at the right time and kind of got thrown into it and was very, very lucky. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you got to learn from one of the best for sure. I grew up listening to Bob Robertson. I mean, people, a lot of Coug fans will remember, but not every game was on TV. So you were
no,
listening to Bob for a lot of those games, and the way he described a game, the way he painted a picture with his words, I always felt like I was right there, you know?
interesting trivia coming up this Saturday. Lee Corso is going to do his final sign off at Ohio State,
Yeah.
for game day. He was actually the guy that Bob got screwed in the Holiday Bowl. He did not get to do the radio because ESPN came in and did the TV, but they also owned the radio rights. So Bob
Wow.
didn't get to do the game. Lee Corso was the color guy on that game. That was his first broadcast.
Wow.
And he
I had no idea.
sucked. He was terrible. He was calling out. He was going, that number 28 guy, he should be, there's another penalty. That number, he didn't even have names. He just called out the numbers. I mean, what an idiot. So anyway,
Wow.
poor Bob
That's
got
crazy.
hosed after all these years. He didn't even get to do the bowl game. So that was and that was one of the things that Bob was very, very disappointed in, is he didn't get a chance, after all those years to be able to do something that was so important for so many Cougar fans. And that was that Holiday Bowl in 81.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I only got to meet Bob once, and it was when I was working for the Everett Aqua Sox, and he was still doing radio for Spokane. Yep.
Yeah.
And I walked by him underneath the stands, and I'm like, I see him from far away. I'm going, oh my gosh, that's Bob Robertson. And I'm like, I don't know if I should say hi or what. And he walks up to me and a ticket kid and introduces himself and talked to me. So just an all-timer for sure.
He was so gracious, and he did that for so many people. And there's so many folks that have stories about him. And I'll also tell you that when I owned the Cougar rights, and that was one of the things I got into syndication, which allowed me to stay around, broadcasts like this. We owned the WSU rights, which is probably why I stayed on for 14 years. And, nobody had a chance to fire me because I was the rights holder. In fact, we had a story where I gave out one of the umpires. I think it was, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He was a famous dude, got in trouble. I gave out his home number on the air, and Bob was trying to turn down the mic. He had like 500 calls. He had to shut the phone off because Cougar fans were calling some crappy calls. The guy was Gordon Reese. It was Gordon Reese who was the head referee. Well, it was Drew Bledsoe, and they hosed Drew on like an intentional grounding call. It was terrible, and an offensive pass interference call, and I just went nuts. So Gordon Reese is in the Oregon State Hall of Fame, and I go, why the hell is he doing an Oregon State game against the Cougs when he's a freaking Hall of Fame guy for Oregon State? I thought that was crap, but they also had his home number in the bio. So I give the number out on the air. And people are calling anyway. The next morning, I'm in Seattle at our office on Monday, and also the phone rings, and it's the head of officiating for the Pac-10. And he picks up the phone. He goes, I've got a complaint regarding your color guy, Paul Sorensen. I go, okay, what did he do? And this is me answering the phone. And he went off and told the story. He goes, well, I guess he gave out his home number. I go, well, how did he get his home number? And on the air, and he goes, well, I don't know. I go, well, I can tell you because I'm Paul Sorensen, and I told the story. And he goes, well, we're sending you a sanction letter saying that that's a no, and you're in trouble, And I go, well, what do you want me to do? Slap my wrist? Shame on Paul? I'm not firing me. Sorry, pal, but you might want to think about not putting somebody that basically is in their Hall of Fame doing a game on that. And I thought both of those calls were garbage. You might want to look at that, and they were. And they were. In fact, Price ended up telling me that he got apology letters on that. So now that was early in my career. There's certain things that you can and can't do, and that was one of them. Okay. So I was a little bit over the top on that, and I got in trouble, rightfully so. And that was absolutely the right thing to do. But here I was as the rights holder, the syndicator.
Yeah, what are they gonna do?
What are they going to do? It's like, so I made sure I put that in the front desk, and it's like, I got in trouble by the Pac-12, but who cares? So.
Yeah, honestly, with the history of officiating in this conference,
and it's going to get worse. Wait till you see the officials this year. I can't tell you, but I've got some stories on some people that, some of the people that they have on these crews. Oh my goodness, they're not even good high school officials. This is going to be scary. So just bite your tongue, because it's going to be a crazy season.
And here's the thing. I never feel like it's even just like, I can watch a game that's just poorly officiated and bad calls are going both ways. And one team
then you can handle that. But because it balances itself out. But if it's so over the top on one way or another, and it's so egregious that you look at it and you go, what are you looking at?
I swear I've watched Cougar games where every time the ball is spotted, it's spotted 1.5 yards behind where the guy actually ended up. And it's funny. So I'm in a family, 4 generations of Cougs. When we all get together to watch a game, it just sounds like such a bitch fest. We'll be up by 3 touchdowns and we'll give up a field goal, and everybody's like, it's over. We're gonna say, do the phrase that we won't say, but
the classic. The classic one is the Connor Halliday 60-59 Cal game. With Mike Leach, and he wants to run, a mesh route because they're on the 2, they're going to score.
Yeah.
And by the way, if he throws that touchdown, he breaks Pat Mahomes' record for
Yeah.
700, I think it was 43 yards, had been 745. He would have
Right.
been the NCAA champion. Both of those guys are tied for it,
Yeah.
and they would have won the game. So the special teams guy is going, no, we'll kick it. It's an extra point. I mean, it's a gimme. So we win the game with an extra point field goal. And Leach goes, if he doesn't make the kick, you lose your job. Well, guess what? Kicker guy walks out there, prances, burps it right. Everybody in the stadium is crushed. Holiday doesn't get the record. Cougs don't win the game. And you lose a game by 1 because your kicker missed it, and he fires the special teams coach on the headset that night.
Yeah.
When that guy, misses a kick.
No,
Unbelievable.
there's times where I look back and I'm like, okay, maybe we're just all sensitive, right? We just care so much and we're just sensitive. But if you look at the number of games that have gone the other team's way because of poor officiating, we are so disproportionately impacted. It's not even funny. I think there was a study out that proved that we are, quote unquote, the unluckiest team in college football because we had more blown calls go against us. And I've seen it with my own eyes, man. There's been times where I'm like, what's the conspiracy? Who's getting paid behind the scenes? I always wonder.
Kind of interesting. They had a chart that came out from 2002 to 24. They ranked the top 15 teams in the country that went up against top 25 teams, and the strength of schedule.
Yeah.
You know where Washington State came in at? 11th.
Yeah.
They were 11-8, 19 times they played top 25 teams. They won 11 and lost 8. That's 57.9%. Boise State was the next on the list. They were 15th. They had 21 games. They were, 11-10 at 52%. I think Oregon State was down like at 18th or 19th.
Yeah,
so 3 teams in the new Pac-12 were in the top 20,
and
which
we're
I
ahead
think
of
is
UW.
really interesting. So strength of schedule, the Cougs, when they play a top 25 team, they have done really well head to head, but again, we've had our shares of just absolute clinkers, the USC game, back in 2018 when that targeting penalty came in that basically cost the Cougs the Rose Bowl that year.
Yeah.
The bonehead plays. I mean, when I got screwed on the pick in the end zone, we ended up winning the game against ASU, and they were 16th in the country, and we knocked them off. We still beat them, but cost me a pick, which ended up costing me the opportunity to leave the country or leave the conference, an interception. So that kind of made me grumpy, but it is what it is. And we figure out a way to overcome that stuff, and we just move on, and we've got a hard shell. We've got a hard bark. So I think that's what makes Cougar fans special, which makes it fun. So.
Okay. So you've had a chance to watch a few practices from the Jimmy Rogers era. We're going to shift gears now to the 2025 Cougs. What stands out to you about his coaching style, his staff, the way he runs practice?
He's old school, and he's old school in the way, if you're a John Wooden person, you understand how disciplined John Wooden was, from tying his shoes a certain way to having the socks a certain way, to having the uniform a certain way, the top a certain way, the way you come out of the tunnel, the way you practice, the way you line up on the court, the way you do your drills. Jimmy Rogers is exactly the same way. I'll give you an example. We went back for the Legends in Our Own Mind deal where we have 90 ex-football players that come back. They invite us. We go and drink at the Coug, have a wing ding, guys throwing their shirts up in the air. And then everybody asks you to put your shirt back on. And, it's just when you get old, it just happens that way. But we had a blast. And we got invited to one of the meetings with all the teammates. You see how big these guys are. And he's going through film, and they're showing, basically the walkthrough. They have drills, and they show on the film, or basically on the screen, exactly where they want all the quarterbacks to be, the running backs, the wide receivers, the DBs, the linebackers, the D linemen. Here's where you line up. And then here's the drill. Then they have a video of the drill. And then they bring 2 guys out and say, here's how you're going to do it. They walk you through every individual thing. For me, on the defensive side, we were pursuit, and we were line up, 1 by 11. One guy has to do his job, and 11 have to execute. So you have to have fits, and your fits are not only your passing fits, but your rush fits and how everything works together. And so he is really specific on how he wants guys to do things, how the angles are, how you pursue, how you tackle, how you set up with your shoulder. I sat there and I went, oh, it's freaking about time, because that was the worst tackling defense I've seen the last 2 years. I sat
Yeah.
there and I'm going, I can fill the freaking A gap right now with my fat ass. And those guys, they couldn't tackle a fly. It's embarrassing. I've never seen a team try to grab people. They
Yeah.
look like, Nacho Libre coming out and going, doing one of those things. It was awful. Well, these guys are head over across the thigh, alligator twist. It was like watching a rugby movie. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that struck me, was the attention to detail. The second thing was the intensity in the practice. And the third thing was how quickly these guys go from play to play, and basically just how they're able to kind of move around, and how he really, it's all about winning for him. He's going to put the best guy in, and he
Right.
doesn't give a crap who it is.
Right.
They have what, 70, I think it's like 75 or 76 new players. Basically you've got 3 or 4 starters that are coming back on offense, and about 2 or 3 on defense. But that tells you that the guys that they're bringing in are pretty freaking good. Now, a
Yeah.
lot of guys left. I give them credit for that. But you know what? The guys that they're bringing in, all you have to do is go back and look what happened at Indiana. They brought in a bunch of FCS guys. The Indiana coach came from an FCS program, and I think we're playing them, this
Yeah.
year. They
Yeah.
came in, they were 10-0 until they
Yep.
played Ohio State, then they got crushed. But still, they did the exact same thing that Jimmy Rogers is doing.
Right.
But Jimmy Rogers' program won a national championship in 23, lost to North
Right.
Dakota State. That
Yep.
won the national championship. They got beat by him in the semis on a late touchdown that they would have gone back to their second consecutive national championship game. So this guy
Yeah.
knows how to win. This guy's a grinder. He's got a majority of his staff there that follow lockstep in terms of what he's doing. So this is a program that understands where they need to be. Now, they're not where they're going to be, but they're
Right.
setting themselves up for 2026 when they roll into the conference. And here's the difference in the whole thing. Back in the day, in the old Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8, Washington State, Oregon State, where were we? We were always considered what? Bottom feeders?
Right.
People
Right.
didn't think much of us. We were always kind of an afterthought. Well, guess what? In the new conference, now it's a Boise State, it's an Oregon State, it's a Washington State
Yep.
at the top. So
Yep.
the whole dynamic has changed from that perspective. And you have to have a guy that thinks along those lines. Jimmy
Yes.
Rogers is a top down kind of coach, not
Right.
a bottom up kind of coach. Jimmy
Right.
expects to win. Jimmy wants to win, and Jimmy is going to put you in a position to win. And that's what I noticed.
Yeah, I love the
How's
position
that?
that we're in the new Pac-12. I love it. I would so much rather be where we are in our conference than a mid-tier Big Ten team like the Huskies are
Yeah.
going to be for a
What were they
while.
picked? 10th? They were
Yeah.
picked 10th in the Big 12 or Big 10 or the Big 18 or whatever the
Yeah.
hell it is.
Yeah,
10th.
it's about having the ability
Go
to
team.
access the playoff.
Woo.
And it does make me wonder. We talked about this on the podcast in the past. How long do Husky fans put up with that before they start tuning out, not attending games, all that stuff? Because we both know that doesn't fly at UW losing. So, but they're in a tough position. They're going to play outside their time zone a ton again this year. And that's
you
not going
think
to stop.
Ohio State and Michigan State and Michigan are going to give them any credit?
Yeah.
They don't care about USC, UCLA, Oregon, or Washington at all. And they are so much farther down the line than where they were. They were the top programs on the West Coast. They're not now. They're not
Yeah.
going to get any slack. They're not going to get any credit, and they're going to get all those lovely Friday night windows. And if they think any differently, they're smoking the wrong kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
good
well,
luck.
Jason Puckett's been talking about it a little bit on his show, but you gotta love that they left the conference for more visibility. Yet they're the first 2 weeks of the season they're on at 8 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Fun times.
Well, and the best part of this whole thing is you look at the Pac-12 in terms of the CW. They average 500,000 viewers. The ACC averaged 400,000. The Big 12 on FS1 averaged 270,000. So it's kind of interesting because the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, they share basically the ESPN and the Fox network. The Big 10 and the Big 12 share Fox as well. Really, the only thing that the Pac-12 shares, they share the CW with the ACC, but they have the ACC window in the morning. Then the Pac-12 has that window in the afternoon with the CW and CBS. And so really and they're getting into 100% of the homes. So they have a network, and they're going to add 2 more network partners that'll either be a streaming factor or another additional deal. So their network exposure is so much better than anything they have ever had. Now, the money is not going to necessarily be there, but there's also another argument to that, and that's the Pac-12 network that's
Right.
doing all of the production for all
Yep.
of those games that are coming out here. And
Yep.
Oregon State and Washington State are going to get a disproportionate share of that revenue. That's going to help those programs because they brought that to the conference. And so that's something that nobody talks about. And that's something that actually is going to elevate those two programs, which is really cool. So there you go.
Absolutely. Okay, so the lights are on in Martin Stadium. It's Saturday night, August 30th. We break the huddle and jog out onto the field. Who's under center for
Zevi.
the Cougs?
Zevi.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it wouldn't surprise me if they play all four of those guys.
Yeah.
Not at all. They could have a package for all four of them because Potter, as he's got he's got a hose. He can throw the ball as well as anybody downfield. He's 6'5", not a great runner, but you know what? He can stretch the field. And then you've got two guys in Duggar and Shepard that, when's the last time you had 6'3", 215, 220, and 6'3", 235 run around a quarterback that can, clown stomp freaking safeties and can run away? I mean, the Pittsburgh kid, he was a track guy. So they're bringing a different, and here's the other thing. Back in our day, we're going back to the Stone Age. We had Ricky Turner, who was a sprinter out of Compton High School, and he was a great runner, but he could also throw. And we had Cleet Casper, who was 6'3", who couldn't run away from, a rock, but was a great thrower, but he could run it when he had to. So we had two guys that were comparable, and so one could throw, one could run. Well, then you got Mateer and you got Cam Ward. So Mateer had his own package, and he was pretty darn good last year, in terms of leading the nation, in terms of touchdowns and nearly 1,000 yards rushing, over 3,000 throwing, over 4,000 total. So you're going to have a combination of a couple of quarterbacks that are going to give you a dynamic. And here's what Jimmy Rogers can do. He's going to go with the guy with the hot hand. So all of a sudden, say Zevi's not having a great day throwing the football. All of a sudden, say they bring in, so Shepard comes in. All of a sudden, now he's running the ball off tackle. And then all of a sudden, they stuff that. And then he comes in and he starts running the RPO because now the safeties are coming up. And the linebackers are pinching. And all of a sudden, they're finding all these seams open. And he's hitting that little slant. He's hitting that seam and the arc release on the tight end. And all of a sudden, everything opens up. That changes the entire dynamics of this offense. And that's what having these multiple different guys in there can do for you. So I hate it when we had Pat Beach and they were running the frickin' veer and I had to come up and take the tight end on every single time. And then he would run right by me and they just dump the ball right over my head because you were expecting him to block you. And then he would just swim move you or arc release on you. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that's one of the hardest things to stop. That's what this offense is going to do. I'm actually
thrilled to see this. I'm thrilled to see this offense next year. And I actually think there's a lot of people saying, well, we have a defensive coach. We're going to be in low scoring games. I think this offense is going to score and score often. And the reason why is because, yes, we are going to run the football. Yes, we are going to go away from the air raid. But Danny Friend, I'm probably butchering his last name there, is a young offensive genius in the making. And I think a lot of Cougar fans are expecting us to line up in I formation and run the ball into a brick wall like maybe you watched the Seahawks do during the Pete Carroll era. It's not going to be like that. The running game is going to have sophistication to it. We're going to spread the ball out. We're going to line up every now and then with no running backs in the backfield. So I'm excited to actually see this offense. It's a little more balanced than maybe what we've seen in the past.
Well, and he was a former quarterback at North Dakota. I remember when he was there before my son played at Idaho State, but I remember watching him because Eastern Washington used to play North Dakota, and he was really good at the RPO. And so what he was good at, and he's the kind of guy, and here's a little secret. I'm going to give you a little something that a lot of people don't know. Well, they also brought in the old OC from WSU who was at Oklahoma because they really liked what they saw in the Holiday Bowl with the passing offense. So they're incorporating some of the tweaks from that Holiday Bowl game on the passing side into the RPO attack that basically he's had at both North Dakota and also South Dakota State. So you've got a couple of dynamics going here. You've got a rushing attack, and we haven't had a good rushing attack in 15 years, going back to Price, really maybe the early stages of Mike Leach. But, if you don't have to defend the run, you can spend the whole time in the pass. That's easy to defend. All you have to do is backpedal and identify routes. But if you have to run the ball and you're effective at running the ball, that changes the entire dynamics, because now all of a sudden you come out, you're expecting to run, they throw, then you're expecting them to throw and they run, then you know what the hell they're going to do. Then they change all the different looks up, and they're going 3-by-1s, 2-by-2s, they're bringing motion in, they're doing different things, and then you're screwed.
Yeah,
And now you can have offensive linemen 3 or 4 yards downfield because it looks like a run, they're throwing the ball.
yeah,
There's so many different things you can do up front to mess with looks. So now you're just staying back, and you're kind of, it's paralysis by analysis, and that's no way for a defense to play. You've got the defense. That's
yeah,
what this offense is going to do.
yeah.
And if you're physical at the point of attack, you
Yes.
wear the defense down, you speed the game up. The last great, I can remember, I can remember when UCLA game was on the line. Washington State ran the ball 15 straight times against UCLA and took a knee on their two and ended the game. It was the most physically dominating, impressive, and that was against the number one team in the nation.
Yeah.
When Troy Aikman was the cornerback in the Rose Bowl on national television. And that was the most impressive, and just the domination. They wore that defense out. They piss pounded those guys right up the middle, and there was nothing UCLA could do about it.
Yeah.
That's what this team wants to get to.
Yeah. I know.
There you go.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Okay, so biggest game of the season next year. What game, if the Cougs win, what game does the season hinge on next season for
Well,
Washington State?
honestly, I mean, anytime besides the Apple Cup, because that's a given, you always want to beat the the purple and P, just because of the Huskies, and you want to make it 2 in a row. And the fact that they go, hey, we have a home winning streak. I go, hey, dumbasses, you lost in Seattle. Okay,
Yeah,
I don't care where
that's
they play that. You lost in Seattle. That's a freaking Seattle loss. So don't give me that crap.
Yeah.
So taking the Apple Cup out of the mix, you always want to win that game. I think Ole Miss and/or Virginia, any of the East Coast trips are huge. I'll tell you why. Because you're setting the stage for 2026, and you go back there. 80% of the media is east of the Mississippi.
Yep.
If you go back and you play Ole Miss well, say you knock Ole Miss off, or you take it to Virginia, or you take it to whoever else, you win 2 out of those 3 East Coast trips.
Yeah.
Those are huge for you for the next year.
Absolutely.
Because now you got guys. Hey, Washington State came back here last year and they took Virginia apart, or what I mean. They played Ole Miss. They had a hell of a game there.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now that changes the entire dynamics of how you're perceived out here. So I think those games, those East Coast games, are going to be are kind of really, that's a momentum deal, because this is barnstorming, dude. That's all this is.
Yeah.
It's a barnstorming year. You go out and you play as many games as you can play, try to win as many as you can, and set yourself up for 2026 in the new Pac-12.
All right, last question. Apple Cup prediction. I know the Cougs win, but
24-17. We're going to go the same thing we had last year. We're just going to make it a home win. I will say that Washington's better with Williams behind a quarterback. Question mark on their offensive line. If they can protect him, he's going to be a problem. And Coleman, their running back, is really good. I think their defense is better this year. I think they're going to be better against the pass, but I think we can run the ball against them. And if we can do that, shorten the game, I think the Cougs are going to have to get a couple of turnovers, but I think our defense is going to be better. And I think it's going to be more physical. I think this is going to be a physical smash mouth game, but I'm worried about their dual threat QB. I think he's good.
Yeah.
And I think he's a lot better than the dude that they had behind the center last year. But I'm staying with the same score, and I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, because I think it's going to be a defensive struggle. Turnover is the key. Who's ever plus on the turnover side is going to win that football game. And I'm going with the Cougs because it's in Pullman, and we hate anybody that wears a different color than crimson and gray. And Pat Chun's their athletic director.
There you go.
He should not be invited back to Martin Stadium. He should have to stay in Seattle.
He can sit in one of those outhouses.
He can watch it on TV and sit in the nice little AD box there in Husky in the Husky Stadium there.
Awesome. All right, Paul. Thanks again for jumping on. We really appreciate it.
Drew, anytime, buddy. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and wishing you a great season this year. It's going to be a lot of fun for the Crimson and Gray, and I'm really excited for this program, and I'm excited for all the sports too. And I know the athletic department is working hard on trying to make it a great game day experience down there. And I know it's easy to moan and bitch about the schedule, but it is what it is, and for them to pull things together, with less than 2 years after getting slaughtered by, the Traitorous 10, for them to have any teams to come in, we got to play Oregon State twice. So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
Just know that there's a lot of sunshine behind the clouds, and there's a lot of good things that are coming Washington State's way. So just hang in there, keep supporting the program, give Jimmy
Absolutely.
Rogers the support and those players the support that they deserve. Contribute to the collective, contribute to the Cougar Athletic Foundation. Drink as much beer and wine and eat cheese and do all the different things that you can, because it does make a difference, because we want to keep these kids around, because they're
Yeah.
awfully darn good, because they pledge to be Cougs, and us old Cougs appreciate those young Cougs, and we want them to keep coming to Washington State.
Absolutely. Are you going to be able to make it to Pullman at all this season?
Last game of the year, I'll be able
All
to go to the Oregon
right.
State game, so I'll
All
be
right.
there, and I'll be throwing whatever I can at those goofy Oregon State Beavers. But we're attached. We're going to root for them for every single game except for 2, when we have to play them in Corvallis and in Pullman. How about that?
Sounds great. Well, let me know when you get into town. I'll have to buy you a beer at the Coug for
I'll
jumping
buy
on.
you one,
Appreciate
pal. We'll quid pro quo it. How's that sound? Thanks, man.
it. Sounds
Appreciate
good.
the
Yep.
opportunity, buddy. Go
Heck yeah.
Cougs.
Go Cougs.